Hello Steelers, and welcome to this slightly different hobby update. Ever so slightly different in that this week I have absolutely painted nothing. I've got some French heavy dragoons sitting on the workbench, which are about halfway through. I've ink washed them, I've painted most of it, done all the undercoats. I just need to do some highlights and then also add a few horse colours to the horse flesh, and they will be almost done. They are about 70% done at this point already, but I've literally not touched them all week because I've been very busy doing other things. Now, just before Christmas, I went over to Germany and I worked up what we call toil, to time off in lieu. So I had to take it. We have to take it within about a month or so of building it up. So I took it off this week, just gone. This week that's just gone. I'm recording this on Friday. And I spent the entire time, because my wife didn't have any spare holiday, so I spent the entire time filming and gaming. So that's pretty much all I've done this week, rather than doing any painting or anything. I'm going to do some painting, probably maybe over the weekend if I can squeeze it in somewhere. But as I say, I literally have not touched a paintbrush because my paint desk has been so full of figures and various bits and pieces, boxes and things like that. And I'll not even be able to get to it anyway, even if I had the time, and the time has flown away. A reason for this is, well, one of the reasons I took the week off is because on Monday just gone, I actually went down to Wargames Illustrated, their headquarters down in Nottingham, to meet up with James Morris from Mogsy Makes. He wrote Midgard as well very recently, which he told me is doing really well sales wise, both through hard print and PDF as well, so that's great to hear. Fantastic work there, James. But the reason I went down there is not to play Midgard, but was to play games with James, but First World War games. Now, I mentioned this in the previous hobby update, but we'd been talking about it maybe for about a year or so. I think I bumped into him at Partisan and we got chatting about First World War wargaming and the fact that we'd both been to Verdun, and the fact that he'd actually created a participation game based around Verdun. He'd also done a square bashing game for Verdun as well. And he said, let's set it up. We can, I can film it, turn it into a couple of battle reports, which I have done. And he can also write an article about it as well for Wargames Illustrated, which I'm assuming he is probably in the process of doing now because we're taking photos. So we're kind of both, had ulterior motives, but we also it was just a nice meet up and have a game with somebody and spend the entire day gaming. So what did we do? As I say, I've got full battle reports of both of these games coming out anyway, but here's like a bit of a teaser. They're not going to be out for a little while, so this is, like I say, a bit of a teaser. The first one is the German attack on Fort Vaux. It was part of the Verdun 1916 fighting, where the Germans actually got into the fort and they laid siege to it for about 4 days. The French were holding out as long as they could until they had to surrender after 4 days. They almost had a relief force come through. And what James had done had recreated the tunnels within the fort. So it's almost pretty much a First World War dungeon bash, if you can believe that, but no goblins in it, thankfully. So basically, we had 2 games of this because it only took about half an hour or so to play. It took longer to actually set the thing up than it did to play. But this was all homemade stuff. James had made all this himself, literally just using, I think it was foam card and railway modelers paper stuck on the sides of the wall and things. Then obviously painted up all the figures himself, all in 28mm, and it just looked fantastic. And it was such a really clever, innovative game as well. The Germans basically had to fight from barricade to barricade. You had supports that you could throw in from cards. The French had the same, but they only had a certain amount of cards that they could play before they ran out. So they had a diminishing amount of resources. The Germans kept getting them back in the game. And slowly, in the first game I was the German attackers. I managed to win it by pushing basically a flamethrower that cleared out the entire tunnels up to his point, and then he kind of stopped me a little bit with a machine gun, but I was able to push on and get into the fort itself. Then we swapped sides. I played this time as the French on the other side, and this time the Germans won again. I think, yeah, the Germans did win. James managed to get all the way up into the latrines and and beyond the latrines and into the actual fort itself. But you also had, as I said, these cards, so they're like event cards. There were things that actually happened during the battle. The game was set, you basically did 4 attacks per day, and you had 4 days, so it was like 16 moves basically for the Germans to get in. Really, really clever, really innovative, and we were talking about it, and James said because he'd been playing this, because we played it, he was actually interested in taking it back out on the road as well, because he had showed it at Partisan in the past. So fingers crossed, in the next year or so, hopefully you'll be able to see that in the flesh around some shows, and also play it. And I you know, if you do see it, do play it, because it is a great game, really good fun, right, you know, nail biting tension on both sides of it. Then in the afternoon we swapped over, and we also sorted out a game of square bashing. This was the assault on Fort Vaux from above ground rather than the underground tunnel that we'd just been playing in. So we'd gone microscopic, and then we kind of come out telescopic out to the much bigger area. And this was a game of square bashing, which, if you've watched this channel enough, you probably know is one of my favourite games. It's a really, really good game by Peter Pig. Almost impossible to read, but fantastic set of rules once you do persevere with it. I do have a square bashing game coming out at some point in the future. I've got it, it's filmed and waiting to come out at some point. So that's, but this time we played square bashing, and we were using James's 12mm figures, and I think, if I remember, these are from Callistra, if I'm not misremembering. Wherever they came from, they were really, really nice figures. And it's really made me rethink my life choices when it came to doing square bashing in 15mm. And yes, this was basically a German attack against Fort Vaux. I had to try and either capture 3/4 of the fort, or 3 of the objectives, including Le Tranchement 1, and also, or push a unit right to the very back line as well. The problem was every move was being diminished because of the really bad underground, because of the terrain, because it was so smashed up. So you had to dice to move from square to square, so it's quite difficult to get forward. And you know, the times that where I needed it, it just didn't happen. And then we also had the countdown timer, and very, very luckily James's countdown timer got down to 0 before I was able to capture any more than 1/4 of the fort itself. I was pretty much on the cusp of getting in and doing everything else. So it's a really, really good game again. And again, just slightly different as well to what I've played with square bashing before. I'd never played with French armies in square bashing, so that was nice to try out. And it's something I'm thinking about doing for the future as well. It's just kind of been locked away in the back of my mind there, just to you know, just to come back to at some point. And I might even look into 10 or 12mm figures for it at some point in the future. But you know, I'm still working my way through Vietnam and black powder stuff at the moment, so that's going to be on the very much on the back burner. So yeah, once again, I mean, massive thank you there for James for suggesting it, for also setting it up as well, and also a huge thank you for Wargames Illustrated for hosting as well in their fantastic gaming room, which is absolutely packed full of scenery and figures and all sorts of things, as you would expect in that kind of place. Really, really good. So yeah, massive thank you to Dan for looking after us and buying us hobnobs as well. So, after I'd got back from Wargames Illustrated on the Tuesday, I decided, I've been reading it for the last few days, for the last week or so, to play a game of black powder, because I'd got enough figures for the epic stuff for about 1,000 points worth of a side. I don't really use points. I'm not that fussed about it, but I thought because I'm doing the first game of black powder, I may as well play it as intended. So I basically, you know, put together about 1,000 points worth of figures for both sides. It came down to about 3 or 4 brigades each side, and I played that using those epic figures, and basically set up a very basic game based on Quatre Bras, so a crossroads held by the British, attacked by the French, and it went along. And I filmed that as another battle report as well. which again I'm currently in the process at the moment as I record this, in the process of editing it, so that's not going to be out for quite a while, but it will be along. This was the first full game of Black Powder I played it once before at the club, an Anglo-Zulu war game, but I really could not remember it, and it was a few years ago now, and I just couldn't remember it at all, any little bit about it. So it was interesting to play it, and it was interesting to see what how Black Powder plays compared to other rule sets that are out there, which I'll come to in a second. And also, you know, would I like it, and you know, what kind of game is it really? And if I'm honest, it's not a game for me. I found it a little too this may sound negative, a little too simplistic. I think there wasn't a huge amount of granularity to it. It's a really good introductory game to the Napoleonic period, and it is a simple enough game that will get people playing quite quickly. I think, you know, if you've never played that kind of large battle game before. I mean, I have a few issues with it. There's some interesting aspects in there that you can see have come straight out of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, you know, because both authors were involved in writing that. And I can just, you know, you can just see where the DNA of it lies. But I had fun, I enjoyed the game, and as I say, I've recorded that, and I will be putting that out at some point in the future on the channel, so you'll see that. Then the following day, this was now Wednesday, I've kind of lost track of time at this point, I left the setup basically because it took such a long time to get all the figures out and sort it all out. I thought, well, I may as well use this setup, and I'm actually going to play a game of GDA 2 instead, General d'Armée 2, because the previous game of General d'Armée that I'd played, I'd used it without any, it was only an infantry game, and I'd not used any cavalry at all, because I didn't want to stack too much on myself for the first game, or, you know, first game on the channel, to have to think about. So basically this time I reused those forces that I'd used for the Black Powder game, and this time I went in with cavalry as well, so a couple of brigades of cavalry on both the British and the French sides. And I mean, to be honest, I can't overestimate about how much I enjoyed GDA 2. Again, I've played it about 4 or 5 times at this point. Every single game has been really, really good, apart from, as usual with games, the very, very first one, but I think that was probably more the players than the game itself. Enough said about that. But it flows really well. It makes there's some really interesting decisions to be made in it. The command state of it as well is really, really interesting, and it really makes you think about what you have to do. There's obviously a lot of nuances in there, little bits and pieces, you know, like these small rules, just little tack-ons that you sometimes forget, which, you know, we always do in games, but it's all about the narrative at the end of the day. And again, I filmed this over a couple of days. In fact, it took quite a while to actually get to to get to a conclusion, but it did get to a conclusion, and that's the point. And so I filmed it, and that again, it's currently on the to edit pile, which is over there. It's not really a pile, it's more like a bunch of files, but that's over there on the computer, and I'm just going to be working my way through and editing that. So don't expect that anytime soon, but it will be out at some point soon. I just can't tell you when at this point. Then it didn't stop then. Thursday night, after I finished GDA 2 and was packed it all away, I went down to the club Thursday night, and with Bart and Paul and Matt and Dean, we had a game of Gaslands. A couple of the lads had only just bought the book. Paul had it for a while. Both Dean and I had it for a while, and we played it. But the last time I played Gaslands was when I recorded a video about it, and that's got to be about a good 5 years ago now. Probably a little less, but it was, a long time ago. I think it was definitely during the COVID times, and that's on the video on the channel. It's actually done really well because it was like a bit of an introductory game, and that's the last time that I played Gaslands. And only a few months ago, I was actually thinking about selling off my Gaslands stuff, because I just thought, well, I'm not playing this really, it's just sitting there. But it's only a tray of a few, Hot Wheels vehicles. So I'm glad I didn't, because last night's game, I'm recording this on Friday, was such a fun game. Absolute madness. We just played a basic, roundabout race game. I think Paul and Dean had said they wanted to play a battle royale, but it never works, I don't think, in Gaslands. It's a racing game. It's not a shooting game, as I tried to explain to people. It's nothing to do with the shooting is desultory and the most boring part of the actual the game itself. The rest of it, the most interesting bit, is the driving and the ramming. But we had a great game. Literally by about, I think, the third, we got about 3 turns into it, because we probably over-egged the pudding a little bit. We probably should have really just gone for a couple of cars each, a couple of basic cars each, and with very basic weapons for the first game, for the introductory game for people. But we can come back and do that at some point. But yeah, I think everybody had about 3 vehicles each, so it took quite a while to even get through the first turn. And also, it helps as well if people actually read the rules the night before, at least. And I'd forgotten to do so, and nobody else had done so. So it took quite a while for it actually come back to me what we were supposed to do. But I'd forgotten how much of a great game it is, and it's so much fun as well. So I might even actually set that up and do some filming of that at some point in the future. Again, do another Gaslands game in future using some of my vehicles, because it's just madness. It's brilliant though. And in the end, Bart won, and that was simply because I span out. The car that was my car that was leading had spun out. Bart had a performance car, so he could basically just whack it down the road and just turn around those corners and finish the game. So at that point we gave it to Bart. We conceded. But yeah, brilliant game. It's one of those things you kind of have to play it a couple of times, I think, just to really get that idea of how it works. But it is, once you get the little subtleties in there, it is a really, really good, fun game. I thoroughly recommend it. I might even actually do a review of it at some point as well. That might be a thing to do, again, while it's on my mind. And then also, you can see in front of me I have this shattered landscape, or a space landscape, as my wife called it. This is going to be a game, I'm going to film this later on today, the third game of Through the Mud and the Blood, and I'm sticking with a Verdun theme. For this is going to be an German attack up the Mort de Homme, which is the big one of the big hills on the edge of Verdun that the Germans tried to attack in October. I can't remember the date of it. In 1916, to try to capture it, and it was basically just a shattered landscape of shell craters and partially dug trenches. So this is going to be interesting. I'm doing a German attack on the French positions where they're going to have a machine gun dug in somewhere. So that's the plan. That's what I'm going to be doing this afternoon. I'm looking forward to it because I haven't played Through the Mud and the Blood for quite a while. And I thought about doing first Great War Chain of Command, but that has kind of been put on the back burner for a little while, since Chain of Command 2 is still on its way, and Rich is still at the moment rewriting it as he comes back from Australia, from CanCon. He says he's still rewriting large parts of it, so I'm kind of waiting for that to come out before I actually dive back into the Great War again, just because there's not much point me writing something that may need updating, or I can pull some things out of Chain of Command 2 out of it. So Through the Mud and the Blood, an old classic. It's a good one anyway. It's a great game, and it's something I'm looking forward to very much playing later on today. And looking forward to other things as well. Just to finally wrap up, Sunday is Vapn Attack. When this video is out for the public, I shall be at Vapn Attack, of course. If you're there, say hello. I haven't got anything on my to buy list. The only thing I wanted is, after playing GDA 2, I realised that I probably need a couple of double dice frames. So I'm going to go down to Pendraken, if they're there, which I think they usually are, for mini bit stuff, and then I'm just going to get some of their little 7mm dice frames, the double ones, because in GDA you generally most units take 12 hits, so you suddenly rather than having loads of dice trays everywhere, so I'm going to get quite a few of those and just get those used up, and it's a lot easier than just having dice all over the place. Looks a lot neater. So that's really it. I'll be filming Vapn Attack, of course. I'll try and get some interviews with people as well while I'm there. And again, if you're there and you see me, say hello. I'll be popping around, and I shall try and get some interviews, and I will try and get that video out, show report out as soon as possible, of course. I usually try to get those out pretty quick if I can, but I would expect it's probably sometime early next week. So keep an eye out for that, and I will see you in the next Storm of Steel video.